Okay.
Okay.
All right. Take it away.
Thanks. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for participating today. We are going to be going over a lot in the next 45 minutes or so. So feel free to jump in and ask questions in the chat. This is Untying the Knot, Unlocking New Doors, which is basically a divorce real estate and what to do, kind of high level conversation about divorce within the real estate market. And myself, I'm Sherry Brown, and Carla Kite, who is will introduce herself here shortly, will be presenting today. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll probably save them for the end, so we can get through all the information. Maybe your question will be answered in that time, maybe not. And then I'll check back in on those chat questions at the end. Perfect. So like I said, I'm Sherry. I have been with Remax Alliance and Lydia's home team since 2015. I was certified in divorce real estate in 2016, and yes, that is a thing. Um, we discovered early on when working with divorced clients that to get really the information that I wanted to be able to provide and the service that I was wanted to provide to my real estate in my real estate business and for my divorce clients, that I really needed a little bit more education. So I went out and got some education, and so we've got a certification in divorce real estate. I've also been collaboratively trained. Collaborative divorce is a whole different topic that if you'd like information on, I'm happy to share it with you. I am a member of the Front Range Collaborative Divorce Practice Group, and I have been there since 2018. And yeah, I definitely went through a divorce myself. So um, that had a lot of hurdles in it, and I wish I knew then what I know now. So this is why we like to share all this information with you. All right, so where to get started? There are many ways that you can get a divorce. So I'm just going to, again, this isn't really a divorce seminar, so I'm just going to keep this very high level, but we do want to touch on it. There is you do it yourself way of going. You can be consulting with attorneys. I strongly suggest it if you're going to try to do it yourself. It's pretty easy to do. The paperwork is fairly straightforward, only if you are, there are not really a whole lot of assets. If there's not a marital home, if there's not a lot of shared property, or if there's no kids. Once you get into children and if there's some shared property, I strongly suggest going a different way than do it yourself. There's mediation. And the one thing that you have to remember about mediators, and people get this wrong a lot, is mediators do not give legal advice. They are there to mediate. They don't help with making any decisions for you. So you should be still consulting with an attorney at that point. Obviously, there's attorney representation, which is a litigation model, which is if it's highly contentious or you're going to have to go through the court proceedings, then and attorney representation is extremely important. There's also the collaborative divorce approach, which is really, in my mind, it's one of the best ways of going. A collaborative divorce, really, you have to be on good terms with your soon-to-be ex. And you will each have your own attorneys, though, representing you, but we're looking at that point for a win-win scenario. So if there are children involved, if there are assets to be split up, we are really working towards a mutual win so that both partners can come out of the marriage whole and feeling good and can move forward. And so that's kind of where we start. Who would you need on your team? Again, a family law attorney. A certified divorce lending professional is incredibly important. There are a lot of lenders out there, and Carla is actually certified in divorce lending as well, and she'll talk about that here momentarily. But you, there's a lot of lenders out there, and they don't necessarily know what they're doing in this space. So I strongly advise people to go find a CDLP, and if Carla, to me, in my mind, is the best. A mediator, divorce coach. So there are mediators out there. Again, they are not attorneys. They're not providing legal advice. They are there to facilitate conversations and get those conversations going and try to bring the two people together and making some decisions. There is also a financial advisor. The CDFA and the CPA really are more of numbers people. They are there to crunch numbers. They will help make some of those decisions for you and kind of get you to that next level. Same with a financial planner, although they will take it the next step and they will start working with you on future planning, not just the divorce, but ongoing. Myself as a realtor, again, I strongly suggest if you're going through a divorce that you use somebody that does know the space, because there are a lot of pitfalls that don't happen in a normal transaction, a real estate transaction. So it's good. Sometimes an appraiser will be involved. They'll appraise the home, or they may, if you have a business, they may appraise the business. So again, numbers crunching, not really on the people side. And then on the people side, one of the most important things I think is a therapist for the whole family. I really, think those are incredibly important people to have involved in your situation. So again, real estate is one of the most important decisions, I think second to what's happening with children, if there are any, in the divorce settlement. So it is usually people's largest asset. You want to come out financially stable, if at all possible. There are emotional considerations. This is home. So for me, when you are splitting up, it is very emotional when you're getting involved in, sorry, when you're getting involved in selling that piece. It might be your home. It's where maybe your children were brought up. It might have some very sentimental meaning to you. It's your home. So we always take that into consideration. It's hard. We also look at future housing needs. So if one person's going to stay in the house, is one person going to be buying something else in the future? Are both people you're going to sell the house and both people are going to look for something else? So those things are all important. And then of course there are legal and tax implications, which the only people that can really tell you what to do about that is lawyers and your financial planners. Okay, so I kind of touched on this a moment ago, but the key challenges is trying to decide, are you going to sell or are you going to keep the home? What the equitable distribution is, the mortgage and the financing. Again, back to the emotional factors, they're important to keep in mind, and then the purchase of future homes.
Sherry, there's a question in here.
Oh, great.
Yeah, just really quick. Since you've been through a divorce, and if you were to go through it again now, like what would you have done differently?
I wouldn't have done a do-it-yourself. I would have gotten an
You did it
attorney.
yourself?
I did.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, well, we tried, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And because we did it ourselves, there were things, you don't know what you don't know. And it's important to get someone that has been there and done that, as far as I'm concerned, because what happened was we ended up having to go back after the decree, after the divorce was finalized, and renegotiate almost everything because it was a hot mess. So that's what
So,
we do.
I'm going to ask you this. Did you do it yourself because you thought you could be really amicable, or were you trying to save money?
I think both. We were not in the greatest of financial shape at the time, so splitting up, and having two households with two children at the time was going to be a stretch. So I think we were trying to save money, but at the same time, I thought we were in fairly good speaking terms, which did not turn out to be the case. So What I
It,
thought was going to be friends, just amicably parting ways, was not so.
yeah, yeah. I think I find that with a lot of clients when I talk to them initially, but that's usually because they haven't hit the finances yet.
Yeah,
So, they've made the decision to get divorced emotionally, but they haven't talked about anything, put anything on paper yet. So,
yeah. How about you? I know you went through one too.
yeah. Um, I went through one. We did not do it ourselves per se, but we kind of did. It was actually my brother-in-law at the time. He was an attorney. I tried to do it myself and I got that big stack of paperwork and I went, why don't I didn't even know how to read half of it because it's all, legal garbage. And
Yep.
so, and that eventually was all over the driveway one day. So didn't do that. So then when we finally were ready to go through the process again, I reached out to my brother-in-law and said, we were so broke. And I said, can you please just we'll pay you to do the paperwork. We want no advice from you at all whatsoever. We basically did a collaborative
Hmm.
divorce before collaborative law was a thing in Colorado. So yeah, we said just come to us with whatever it is that we have to figure out. We did own a home.
Hmm.
Um, and tell us what it is we have to figure out. We will figure it out and get back to you. We did that because we did not want him to ever feel like he influenced anything in our divorce.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's what we did.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I could go into a very long story about how we thought we were splitting things up amicably. We took the house because we owned a house that we were trying to sell, but we had to keep it for a couple more years or for at least another year after we split. And then, it just got to be a mess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. You know what? Now that I think about it, I don't even know if I was ever paid out the equity in our house. I know we had a 401k at the time worth 15,000 and I got half of that. That's all
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
So,
I am. Yeah. Yeah.
but it was fine. I moved on and bought my own house and so we were fine. I think that's what we did. I think I just bought a house and he kept the old house and we just left it at that.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, we did end up selling, but it was at a loss because it was during the recession period.
Oh,
So yeah, that got to be fun as well.
oh geez. Yep. That's tricky.
Hmm.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I'm Carla Kite. I am a lender, but I have a business as a divorce mortgage planner. So it's my divorce mortgage planning. And I am a certified divorce lending professional. A little bit about me. I have over 27 years as a mortgage loan originator. I have been a CDLP since 2017. So my experience runs deep. We've been a very high volume team. I mean, nothing's really high volume in the moment, but in the past, we've closed quite a few transactions, which I say that just because I want people to understand the level of experience I have. Currently, I brought on my daughter as my partner. She's pretty much taken over the lending side of it, which has allowed me to just pursue my divorce mortgage planning and that's all I do now is work 100% with divorcing clients. So it fills my cup. The most important thing to me is that I am able to keep people in homeownership. I know for myself how important it was, and I know how different things would be today for me if I had not remained in homeownership. I think since I was 20, I think I have only not owned a home for 6 months, and that's because we were remodeling our current home and we rented a place for 6 months. So that's how much I believe in homeownership. Um, like we were just talking about, I have been divorced, so I get it. My kids were like 3 and 5 when we kind of made the decision to separate, so they were little. I am a member of or I'm affiliated with Divorce Lending Association, Colorado Collaborative Divorce Professionals. I've also been through my collaborative training and Colorado Bar Association, Colorado Women's Bar Association, and I just completed my real estate and mediation certificate. So, which I have no intention of ever being a mediator at all, but it does help me in my practice with my divorce mortgage planning because often I work with both people, and so it's taught me how to be in the same room with them together and how to keep things just keep the inappropriate conversations out of our conversation, just keeping everybody in their lane. So certified divorce mortgage professional. Well, how does that make me any different, right, from any other lender? I don't even know where to start with this. I used to use the analogy that, you wouldn't go to you wouldn't, if you were pregnant and looking for a gynecologist for your baby doctor, you wouldn't go to a heart surgeon to help you deliver your baby. They could do it. I think they could in a pinch, but that's not their specialty. That's not what they do. It becomes more and more and more apparent every single day as I'm working in this divorce space that it is so important to be working with a CDLP during your divorce. Because I hear often from people after their divorce is finalized that they did talk to a lender during their divorce, or they called their servicer, the person that they're actually making their payments to today, asking certain questions, and they were given incorrect information, and it impacted their divorce. So they maybe made agreements during the settlement process that they couldn't actually deliver after final decree. And if any of you have been through a divorce already, and like Sherry alluded to, going back and redoing this stuff after final decree is not fun. Um, Often you can't even get the other party to come back and modify that agreement. So it can be really tricky if we don't get a hold of things before and you don't have that proper information up front.
And expensive.
Yeah, and expensive. Yeah, more money, more time. Nobody
Mhm.
has nobody has any of that, right? So the biggest thing is understanding your options in homeownership during and after divorce. And the reason I put that during and after is because I don't think people realize if you're really amicable, there's a lot of things that we can do during the divorce process so that you don't have to both remain in the marital home throughout the entire process because it can get tricky, right? Emotions are kind of all over the place, so it can get really hard. Um, what we're going to try to figure out when we do the planning is, are you going to keep the marital home? Is your soon-to-be ex going to keep or is your soon-to-be ex going to keep the marital home? Are you going to sell the home? And then we also want to make sure that we're addressing any possible capital gains. I mentioned capital gains a lot through the next couple of slides, and here's why. A lot of times I have people come to me and say, I want to keep this marital home no matter what. Mostly it's because of the children. They usually want to keep the children in the neighborhood, in the school district they're in or whatever. And they will fight really, really hard to keep that home. And then a year later, when they're in a different space and they've moved on, and they realize maybe it's not as important as it was back then, right? Maybe they have met somebody new, they're ready to start a new chapter, and then they go to sell the home and they did not consider capital gains because they weren't selling the home, they were keeping the home. Now they're getting hit with capital gains, and now they don't have as big of a write-off opportunity or an exemption, I should say, because they're single. So it's really, really important that when I'm doing my divorce mortgage planning with people, that we're sitting down and we're looking at everything just in case something changes down the road. Because a lot of times too, we might have somebody that says, well, I just want to keep the house until little Jimmy graduates high school, which is going to be next May of 2026. And so they might settle on that and they unknowingly would have a capital gain at that point. So it's just, we want to make sure we're looking at everything and then letting them pick the best path for them. There we go. Okay, so if you're going to keep the marital home, the options for buying out the equity. So one of the things you can do is you can assume the current loan, and we're going to talk about assumptions more a little bit further. But you can assume the current loan, and then you can get a home equity line of credit to pay out the equity that's owed. You can do a cash out refinance or a buyout refinance to pay out the equity that's owed to the other person. There are actually two different types of loans here. And this is another thing. Most lenders don't know that a buyout refinance exists. So the big difference is that a buyout refinance has a little bit lower of an interest rate and a little bit lower of a fee associated with it. But the biggest thing is on a buyout refinance, you can take that loan all the way up to 95% of the value of the home. So we don't see a whole lot of these happening these days, but we did before. So that will come back as a possibility for buying out the other person. I think probably as the rates come down a little bit more, because everybody today is trying to avoid a refinance like the plague, because they don't want to take the higher rate. So, but anyway, that's a possibility and just something to know. It's different than a cash out refi. You can swap out the equity. So you can take the maintenance or you can take a retirement account or any other asset. And instead of taking out a home equity line of credit to pay out that equity, you can just forego your maintenance if that's how the maintenance is being paid, right? So if the person that's leaving the home owes the person that's keeping the home maintenance, they can just say, I won't pay you maintenance. You don't pay me the equity out of the home and we're good. Okay. Of course, if that is the right number. Okay. So that this is when we really get down to the nitty-gritty part of the planning piece. Okay. So we might determine through all of our scenarios that selling the home is probably the best scenario for you. In that case, you typically will split the proceeds, not always 50-50. This is determined under the law by your attorney or whoever it is that's helping you through this, or if you're doing it yourself, you're going to determine it yourself. The thing that is tricky with this, of course, is that everything's really expensive today. The housing is expensive, interest rates are really high. Obviously, you both have to get a new mortgage when you're doing this. But the bottom line is that sometimes keeping the home can cost you more than actually selling and buying a new home and getting a new higher interest rate. So, I think one of the benefits is obviously that you'll know exactly what that home is worth because I tell everybody that there's no way to know and settle on a value of a home unless you're selling it. Um, I mean, you can settle on it, but you're not going to know for 100% certain what that value is unless you sell. So obviously you would get an appraisal otherwise, but if you're selling, at least you know for sure what it sold for, and then you can just split those proceeds however you determined you're going to split them. You would also share in the capital gain if there is one. And then I think just the other thing is it just gives you a clean break and a new start, right? So I think for a lot of people, even though they don't want to, maybe they think they can overcome that. But a lot of times then when you do, maybe you do find another partner or whatever, bringing them into your previous marital home can be a little bit difficult and create issues. So I think having that clean break and that new start is probably more important than people think.
Mhm.
You know what, something else I want to mention, and I want to say this because I know we've been doing a lot of work in this just on the mortgage side of things alone, is that the big thing that I want people to understand when they sell and decide to buy a new home at these higher interest rates, you now have a tax write-off. And it's not a dollar for dollar difference, but it's a big difference. And so you can't just say, "Oh, I'm selling my current home where my payment was $2,700 and I'm going to a new home where my payment is now $3,800 and looking at that big difference." You have to consider that there is going to be a tax write-off in there. And so that big difference in monthly payment gets smaller because now you will have a tax write-off. Almost everybody that refinanced during COVID, unless their loan amount was over 500,000, did not have the ability to write off their mortgage interest any longer because the interest rates were just too low and everyone's paying too little in mortgage interest. So buying a new home, I know it seems like a big jump in monthly payment, but if you consider that tax benefit, it just eases that pain a little bit. Okay, so and we have some great calculations to share for that too. We might have to add that into this, Sherry.
I think so.
Yeah,
It's something that I talk about a lot when we're talking about, yes, I want to sell, whether it's in a divorce space or whether it's just in a regular
yeah,
buy and sell, is yes, you are losing maybe a great interest rate, but there is that difference that you have to take into account to as well, because it's not going to be the whole chunk that you think it's going to be.
yeah. Were you on that call when Kelsey did that a couple weeks ago?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, yeah, because we have that great spreadsheet and
I know. It's great.
it is like mind blowing. I think we ran a scenario the other day where the effective interest rate after you take the the tax write off into account brought the rate down to like 3.8.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I was like, whoa, I needed to see that myself. So
Yeah. No,
um,
it's good. It's a good little calculator you guys have.
yeah, we'll add that in for our next one.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you know how you qualify? Most people have no clue how lenders look at your qualification for a mortgage, right? Like you can look up what is your debt to income ratio, where should it be, and so on, but you probably don't even know how to calculate your own monthly income unless you are paid like a straight salary or you have a guaranteed 40-hour work week. That those two calculations are fairly simple. The problem that I see today as a lender is that nobody's that simple. Like everybody's got something going on with their income. So they might have a side hustle, that they're doing. They might have commission. They might have bonus income. They might be paid differential pay, like if they're working nights or weekends or holidays, stuff like that. Um, and that doesn't even account for the self-employed people. That's where you really get into a big can of worms. And the big problem is that when you're going through a divorce and the attorneys are calculating your income for the purpose of the support that you're either going to pay or be paid, that calculation is never the calculation that we use. They use something completely different. It is not near as strict as what we look at as a lender. So it's really, really important that we are able to look at everything, regardless of what the attorneys are coming up with, because they're going to determine your support under the law. So that number will be different no matter what. We cannot help them determine that number. I am just here to help you understand this is how we're going to look at your income for qualifying for a mortgage. It has no bearing on what you're paying or what you're getting paid for the child support or separate maintenance. Okay. So this is just really important. The property type can be important. Um, but most people, if they currently have a mortgage on their property, we can usually remortgage that property if needed. Sometimes with condos, things would change there. If you're in a certain condo complex, it could have been warrantable at the time that you purchased, but it's not warrantable today. So we might have some difficulties there. So,
Hey, Carla, I do have one question. I've got one. If I haven't worked during the last 8 years of the marriage because I was home taking care of the kids, and I'm going to have to go back out and get a job, how is that figured?
yeah. So that's really, really common, especially when people have children, because childcare is so expensive, you can't really afford to work, right? So, super common. So it depends. It, and I hate to be really vague with that, but it really depends. If you are going back to work full time and we can get a letter from your employer stating what your new full-time employment is going to be, uh, if we're doing a conventional loan, conforming Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, we can usually use that income moving forward. Sometimes we can even use it before you start your job, depending on what type of a profession it is. So, like if you had a previous history of being a doctor and you are now going back to work as a doctor and you're getting a very nice offer letter with a guarantee from Health One, we will let you use that before you actually go back to work usually. So
I see.
those instances are kind of rare. Typically, we want to see that you've at least started and that you have your first pay stub. Okay. So it depends. There's a lot of differences there. Um, if you're getting support, we have to show a track record of it. So if you're getting child support or maintenance, we have to show that you've received it on an FHA loan for 3 months, on a conventional loan for 6 months, and then it has to continue for 3 years. So that's where the divorce mortgage planning is really, really important because we need to make sure that you are receiving that support for the right length of time for us to count it.
Yeah.
For example, I talked to a lady the other day, and her oldest is turning 16 in August, and her divorce is not going to be final by August. So what we'll have to do with her, because child support typically ages out at 19. So as soon as a child turns 16, we can no longer count that portion of child support towards income for qualifying for a mortgage. So for her, what we'll do is we'll find out when is he going to start paying it, because it also won't count for 6 months. And what we'll do is we'll probably take that full child support amount and we'll lower it and we'll stretch it out a little bit longer if we need that money to qualify.
Mhm.
So you can do some things like that. Child support's not negotiable, but it is, you can make some changes to it to help you make it work to qualifying for a loan.
Okay.
So yeah, and there's a lot involved there when we're talking about support.
Hopefully that answered your question. Great.
So do you know if you will or if you even want to buy before selling the marital home? Um, I find that this happens a lot today because I think that, when people are getting ready to go through a divorce, and I mean, the writing's on the wall. They're just kind of stuck in this space, and divorces can take a long time. They don't want to live together anymore. They can afford it, so they can afford to make this happen. The problem is that they're just kind of in limbo with what they're doing with finances and who's getting paid what and so on. So we can do this even if you know that you're going to sell the marital home. We can go in and we can work on some different scenarios to see if it's possible for you to, number one, qualify to do that. And then sometimes when you're working on the separation agreement, it takes us awarding certain debts to the other person so that you can qualify to buy before selling the other home. And then we can award assets differently to that person as well to kind of counter that debt. So there's a lot of different things that we can do in this space to help you move on before you have finalized everything and before you have sold the home. So it just, this can typically only happen when you are very amicable.
Yeah.
So,
And you
um,
have to be careful because if you don't do it the right way, it could be seen as a marital asset because you bought it before the divorce was final. And then
yep,
it all of a sudden turns into a bigger can of worms. So yes, you can
yeah.
do it, but
So typically, if a couple does end up doing this prior to final decree, we will have the attorneys write up an agreement for them, so that they understand that the new home is the sole ownership of the person that's buying it. So we'll make sure that they do put something to protect them there with that. Okay, so can you assume your current loan? This is what everybody wants to hear. So it is the servicer's discretion, but I can tell you that for almost everybody that refinanced during COVID, they put themselves into a Fannie Mae or a Freddie Mac loan. Those were the good loans with the low rates, etc. Um, there is a clause in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that, well, first of all, it clearly states on all of your paperwork that this is not an assumable loan. But what they mean by that is that it is not assumable in the case of a sale, meaning that they could not list their home with Sherry and allow a new buyer to assume their loan. That's how it's not assumable. But they will allow for a release of liability in the case of a divorce. Okay, that's the ticket right there. You have to understand, you have to ask the right questions of the servicer so that they'll agree to allow your spouse or yourself to assume the loan from each other. The difference, you need to understand the difference between a legal versus a qualified. So a legal assumption would be when you go through the divorce and and you are awarded the home legally. So legally it's yours and legally you are responsible for the mortgage, but that does not dictate that the lender has to allow an assumption. So there's no legal document that can force a lender to remove the exiting spouse from that mortgage. There's nothing that can force them to do that. The person that's keeping the home and that wants to assume the loan has to go through a complete qualification to be able to assume that loan. So they have to go through the qualified to actually remove the other person. Legally, they can move forward. They don't have to go through a loan assumption. But if the person that keeps the home ever makes a late payment, it will impact both people's credits. And that's the biggest part to know right there is that that's the consequence of remaining on a mortgage is that if the mortgage is not paid on time, it will go against your credit. It does not matter if it was awarded to your ex-spouse in the divorce.
That's where I got tripped up. One of the places I got
Okay.
tripped up.
Okay.
I didn't understand that difference between legal because my ex was awarded X and then he stopped paying on X and my name was still on it and there went my credit.
So
So
I can imagine how that went down too.
yeah.
You were probably furious
Mhm.
and you probably made a couple of phone calls saying, I'm not responsible, right?
And they went, oh, yes, you are.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yep,
yeah, I think that and it's Sherry, it's still a huge misconception
it
today.
is.
Like
Yeah.
I literally just talked to a lady this week who she's in the same boat. She is absolutely beside herself that well, she's the one that was awarded the mortgage and she cannot understand why the lender will not allow her to just assume the loan. So I don't know if she qualifies or not. My guess is she doesn't qualify. But she's like, but I have it in my separation agreement that I have to assume the loan. And I'm like, I know, but you have to be able to assume the loan. Just because your separation agreement says you're assuming the loan doesn't mean that the lender is just like, okay, we'll let you assume the loan.
Mhm.
So
Which is why you need you, because a lot of these people don't understand that.
yeah,
And I'll tell you right now, a lot of lenders don't understand that. So,
yeah,
just because the law says something does not mean everybody has to fall into place.
yeah, yeah. So that's what I do with my divorce mortgage planning is even if you're going to assume the loan, we need to make sure that you qualify for that before you say that you're going to do it, right? So that's one of the biggest problems today is that people don't understand the parameters around assuming a loan. So sometimes they will call and they'll get the right answer. Yes, you can assume the loan, and they think for some wild reason that just because they've been paying that mortgage payment on time for the last 3 or 4 years, that this is going to be an easy process. It's
Mhm.
not easy, it takes a long time, and you have to make sure that you qualify properly. So, the parameters to assume a loan are typically a little bit more difficult than what I can do as a lender just on a regular loan. So, when I'm working with people and making sure that they're within the parameters, I'm making sure that they are really within the parameters and even at that, I cannot guarantee that they will get the assumption done, but I'm going to set them up, putting their best foot forward. So, um, the other thing you have to think about when you assume the loan, because everybody wants to assume the loan because they don't want to lose their low interest rate, but they have to understand then how are they going to buy out the equity that they owe? Okay. So, um, it could be more costly to do the assumption and pay out the money that's owed. And this is probably the biggest thing that I work through with my clients is where does it make sense to do an assumption? Where does it make sense to just do a refinance? Um, you never know until you put the numbers on paper. But like I had a lady once who gave up her entire retirement and she agreed to pay her ex 1250 a month for 5 years and just so that she could keep the loan and assume it. The numbers I put together for her in a refinance would have been $20 less a month than what she had agreed to pay for the next 5 years, and she would have been able to keep her retirement. So it's really too bad because she was in her 40s and she gave away literally every dime she had. And she had a lot of people in her ear telling her, no matter what, don't lose this interest rate. She was at 2.25, so she had a sweet interest rate, but it just, when you put it on paper, it just did not make sense. Just did not make sense. Um, the biggest thing that I tell people when they're going through a loan assumption is that when you do a loan assumption, it's like doing a loan without having your loan officer. And if you think back to when you did your loan and what a pain in the butt it was, and you probably cursed your loan officer the whole time, you still had somebody there that was also not getting paid until they got your loan closed. So they were trying to get you to that finish line just as much as you were. In an assumption, you have nobody. You are literally like sending your paperwork into the black hole and waiting to hear back from them. You have nobody advocating for you or helping you through the process. So it can be really tricky. I do help with assumptions. I can't guarantee anything, but I can be your voice and help you through it and help you with the paperwork, which can also be pretty daunting. And I understand the guidelines, which, again, like I said, most people don't, especially when it comes to the income piece, can be really tricky. So, just like the biggest reminder here is that what might be a legal option is not always a mortgage option. I love that statement because it is more true than you would ever imagine. When I talk to somebody after they've been through the divorce process and they maybe are not set up properly, which happens probably 80% of the time, they will say, "Why didn't my attorney tell me that? Why didn't my mediator tell me that?" And I'm like, well, because your mediator is not a lender. Your attorney or your mediator, they separated you under the law. They made sure that things were done properly under the law. That does not mean that they had to properly set you up to qualify for a mortgage. So it's just important to know that attorneys know the law and how to legally separate you, but that does not mean that they are going to make sure that you will qualify for a mortgage moving forward.
That's huge.
Yeah. So, I mean, the benefits, and you can weigh in here, Sherry, too, because we see a lot. Sherry and I are both very, very involved in the divorce space and work with a lot of divorce professionals. And just there's a lot of different pieces. I think a lot of times people say, gosh, how many more people do I need to pay, in this space while I'm going through this divorce? And to me, it's like, I don't know, you need to pay for everybody that's helping you along the way, because if not, it's going to cost you more in the end. And we see it all the time. I think it's important just to get the knowledge and to be like, Sherry and I both have so many resources to share in this space. Um, and I know sure you probably run into the same thing all the time when you talk to somebody initially, they're like, they don't even know where to start, right? They're kind of begging for, any information at all. Sherry is very neutral. I am not. I can be neutral if that's how you want to hire me. If both parties want to hire me, I can be neutral. But typically, I am more of an advocate for the party that hires me. So, but you can talk, I want you to talk a little bit about you being neutral.
Yeah, in the real estate space, it works a little bit differently because if both people are on the title of the home, basically come in representing, the easiest way to describe it is representing the home, not representing either client.
That's a good way.
I am going to be looking at what's in the best interest of getting that home sold, making that happen at the highest price in this, within the guidelines of the decree. If there's a specific time that they're trying to get it done, we try to stick with that. But once, I make sure that we're communicating, that if I'm talking to one without the other there, that I'm mirroring that conversation either by email and just constantly be documenting. If I'm sending out emails, I will CC the other person if it's just to one, just to make sure that there is no perception that I am working on behalf of one or the other. Even if it comes down to, I know one person is going to They're both going to sell, they're selling the home. One person wants to buy something right away and would like to use me. I generally won't do it. If I have to stay neutral, that is a conflict of interest. So I try not to do that. And I refer that out to somebody that can help them buy. So neutrality in this space is important. And again, I'm doing it for me, it's just because no one told me better. And I've also, like I said, at the very beginning of my experience with divorced clients, no one told them better either. And it just did not turn out well. Mistakes were made, things had to go back. We all were kind of kicking ourselves, myself especially, for my own divorce, that I wish I had known what I didn't know. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, I mean, that's you avoid costly mistakes. And sometimes the costs you can't recoup that.
Yeah. So
So
being, so if I have to be neutral, I'd rather serve my clients well and make sure they have all the knowledge that they can, and then refer them to someone that can help them for future purchases down the road.
yeah, yeah. Um, I'll let you talk on this slide, Sherry.
This one is just important. I think everybody needs to remember that this is not an easy process at all. If anyone ever tells you that it's easy, it's simple. It's not. I thought it would be myself. I'm sure Carla thought, oh, I can do this all on my own too. And I had kids to take care of as well. So mine were at the time 11 and 15, so a little older than yours, Carla. But I muddled through, and I don't know that I did any of this very well. By the end, I was exhausted and I hadn't been eating well. I hadn't been doing any of this. So I always like to remind people to be gentle with yourself. You're going to react the way you're going to react. There is a grieving process here because you're saying goodbye to something, whether it was bad, good, or indifferent.
Mhm.
You're definitely losing something. So be gentle with yourself. Talk to people. Make sure you're involved with others. Don't hibernate or try to do it on your own. Exercise, of course, eat well, manage sleep, meditate if you do that. I'm terrible at it, so I don't do that. And breathe and remember to breathe. I think my Lamaze training from when I had kids came in more helpful during this than anything else. Just breathe. Just breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they say that divorce is
High
the
stressor.
yeah, the second to death of a loved one.
Yep.
So, the stress is high. I actually talked to a lady last week who was and I've been talking to her for about a year now. She's coming to terms with it. And I know it takes that time. But she was a mess. And at the end of our phone call, I said, so and so, are you okay? And she said, well, yeah, I mean, blah, blah. She started going on, and I said, no, I'm asking you because you have a very different voice today than what you've had in the past. Um, and she goes, oh my gosh, I just got off of another call with a past coworker of mine, and he said the same thing to me. He said I just didn't sound like myself. And I said, you don't
Mhm.
don't like you need to go find something to bring you down because she was just on fire. So
Yep.
I know if with my clients talk to them a year later, you can tell in their voice that they are a different person.
Yeah. I think if you've ever worked with somebody like in the workspace that is going through a divorce outside it, they are very, very different even at work. They're usually
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
grumpy, grouchy, and in a bad mood all the time. And that's like, oh goodness, are you okay?
And so there you go. It can affect your job and your production, like everything, right?
I can.
All right. So this is us.
This
This
is
is
it.
us. Uh, and we'll send out a follow-up email afterwards. So,
Yeah, let me look and see if there were any other questions.
okay.
Um, yeah, it looks like there's one. Um,
Okay.
Carla, for you, when is it time to actually reach out and call? I mean, we're just in the process of considering a divorce. Not sure that's the way this is going to go, but when do we start to actually think about this?
Yeah. I mean, for a couple of reasons, I would say right away. One, because I have a lot of resources, and I would hate for this to go on for another, 8 months or something like that, and then things explode and you don't know who to call or where to go to. So I want you to have those resources at your fingertips. But also, probably the biggest thing that you're contemplating is your home. And are you going to keep it? Can you keep it? What does that look like? So I don't think it's ever too early to understand. I actually had two consults already this week with people that are not sure if they're going to follow through with the process, but they're losing sleep trying to figure out what does happen with my house.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't think you can do this too early.
Yeah, I would agree, wholeheartedly. I think the earlier you start, it'll help you sleep. Again, it goes back to you don't know what you don't know. You may think this is absolutely impossible to get done, and we may say, no, it's absolutely possible. Or you think it is, and then you find out too late that it isn't. So it's always good to start as start and get the information. There's no harm in
Yeah.
that. It's not like we're going to be pushing you to get that divorce after after you've
Right,
called
right.
us. We really don't want that. We hope that, it goes the way it should go, but at the same time, get the information.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yep, for sure.
I think that's
All
it.
right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
today.
Thanks. Call us if you need us.